They would say we don't have autism. Stop saying we have autism. We have awesomism. And I was like, I get it. It's like, we came in with awesomism. People look at that and they call it a disorder, but they kept saying it's not a disorder. It's a difference. And the reason it looks like a difference is because, again, we're coming in awesome. We're coming in at this very high frequency. That is awesomism. And as we integrate and descend, you might say, in interplay with a physical body, there are some things within that exchange that help us. And there are some things that really, just send us up and out. So, so they told me we have awesomism.
So, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Welcome to a Broaderlands podcast. The opinions expressed on Broaderlands podcasts are those of the guest speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views of the host or Broaderlands podcast.
Suzy Miller, welcome to Broaderlands podcast. It's an honor to have you on.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, and I look forward to learning from you because this is a topic that I've really not have explored. So I'm grateful that you're here to help broaden our lens on this whole topic, autism, or shall I say awesomism, because yeah, so I'm really grateful for you to come on.
Well, I'm excited to talk to you.
Yeah, thank you. You had an event that happened in 1999. Was that an awakening? I would love for you to touch on your experience in 1999. Maybe we could start from there if you don't mind.
Yes, it was quite the awakening. I was a pediatric speech language pathologist at the time, and I had a private practice in the state of Maine and was given a new client diagnosed with autism. He was 4 years old. I went to see him in his daycare center, and he was walking around and he was saying, "It's the millennium, it's 1999." And I thought, I was looking at him through speech pathology eyes, and I didn't have any training in autism because at the time the incidence was 1 in 10,000. So, pretty rare. But he walked right up to me on that day in the daycare center. He looked me in the eyes and he said, "Master." And when he said master, I was like, what's happening? It's like I could feel something happen in my body. And I thought, who's the master here? And then I took him back to the back of the daycare center to work with him. But I didn't know what to do with him. So he's walking around in the room saying it's the millennium, it's 1999. I think he's a weird little kid. And so I just sit back with my back on the door and just kind of think, okay, I'm just going to give him time to get to know me, and I'm going to have time to get to know him. And also was trying to prevent him from escaping because he wanted to be out front with his friends. And then all of a sudden, as he's saying that, I see above his physical body, like this body of light. It looked just like cut out of his physical form, but it was all light. And there was a little tail that hung off of his foot, the light body foot, and it just dipped like right down into about the level of his heart. And I kept rubbing my eyes going, what is that? I mean, I was seeing it with my eyes open, never had seen anything like that before. And when I couldn't get it to go away, I said inside my own head, I was like, what the heck am I seeing? Like, what is that? And I hear this little boy's voice, and he says, "That's my light body. You're here to put my light body back into my physical body."
Wow.
And so I had no idea what he meant. I had no idea why he thought I could do that. But I would say from that moment on, all of these gifts that I had either forgotten that I had or never knew I had came rushing back. I mean, it was like a big flood of energy came in, and it was a little discombobulating, to say the least, but it was almost like he put a key in the lock and turned it, and then everything was able to come in that door. So, yeah, it was quite a ride.
Wow. Do you remember having these gifts as a young child or before you came into a form?
Yeah, I definitely had some gifts when I was a kid. I seemed to be able to see through people very easily. I don't know exactly what I was seeing, but it was very obvious to me when somebody would say something and it wasn't what they meant, or when somebody had feelings for somebody over here when they were supposed to have feelings for somebody over there. It's like, so I had this yeah, awkward part of me that would say the wrong thing, or the right thing maybe at the wrong time. But and also had a real awareness, yeah, just like what was going on inside of people. So
You said he called you master. That must have freaked you out. And what did he mean by that, if you don't mind?
it did freak me out. And I didn't know what he was talking about. I was literally like, who's the master here? I was completely oblivious to what that could have meant in reference to me at the time. And I still have my moments with the kids where I'm oblivious to what that means. But
Mm,
it, I, I now, after all this time, he was seeing a mastery in me
mm.
that I had either hidden or hadn't brought back into awareness, conscious awareness in this lifetime. And he saw it the minute he looked in my eyes and just said it out loud. I just didn't know it. And so, sh- I mean, slow but sure, he brought back each one of those masteries over that year. So things like telepathy and things like being able to heal or, send energy across time and space. There were all kinds of light language. I mean, there were literally different beings that were coming and going that first year that were, you might say, reminding me of what that mastery actually was. And so I tried to learn as fast as I could go.
Yeah, thank you. What's your understanding on the light body versus the physical body?
I think that the physical body is all obviously all the systems and that make up, yeah, the physicality, what's in the 3D reality. The light body is the essence. It's all the information that our essence has held throughout time, um, since the time of leaving source, you might say. And so that light body is going to interface with a physical body in each incarnation. And when we drop the physical body, the light body still has all the information, right? So it comes, the light body merges and separates with our physical form, but it maintains all the capacity. So
So when like the Bible says we're made in the image of God, is that our light body, you would say?
I would I would say the light body is love. It's that
Mm.
the light body to me is all that we've ever been, ever will be, ever could be. And to me, I see God or source as all that is, ever has been, ever will be. Yeah. And so yeah, I think that you might say that that light body is mm, our reflection of all it is. Yeah.
Our divine spark.
Yeah, good way to say it. Yeah,
I love that. I had a couple episodes recently on the light language. What do you know about light language? You know anything about light language?
I do. Right after I met Riley, for a while, there was there was an Aboriginal guide, looked like an Aboriginal guide, just the way he was dressed, would come and sit at the end of my bed, and he would speak in some other language. And at the beginning, I was like, I had no idea what you're talking about or what this is. And I think he was just loosening that up within me. And I went from having a full-time healing practice as a speech language pathologist, or a full-time practice as a speech language pathologist, to a full-time healing practice within that first year that I met Riley. And during that time, clients were finding me and they would come in. And there was one day, there was, of course, this lovely gentleman who's somebody's wife had said, you need to go talk to this person. And so he comes in and he lays down on the table. And that was the very first time that light language came through. And I heard it in my head. I had heard it from this Aboriginal guide, but I had heard it in my head like it was going to come through. And I'm thinking, no, 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 I don't want that to cut. No, 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 especially not, come on, like maybe with somebody who is open, but not this guy. It's like, please don't do that. And I kept saying, no, I'm not going to, in my head, I'm going, no, I'm not going to do this. And I kept hearing, yes, you are. Yeah, it's going to happen. It's just let it. And light language came out. And what I understand about light language, and I still speak it to this day, I still use it, but light language is just a means of bypassing our neurological process. So there's so much information that's held in that light body that is very hard to get. That would be very challenging to offer to somebody if you had to go through their neurological process, because their neurological process is going to go, stop, stop, shut it down, shut it down. But if you use light language, it bypasses that neurological process. So it literally gets into the, you might say, the fractal energy of the field, and then can start working its magic. Yeah.
So when people go to church and they're speaking in tongues, would you consider that light language as well?
I would. I absolutely would. I think that, it comes in many different forms and it comes from different places and spaces. So, yeah, I mean, it sounds like it to me. I mean, I think a lot of times it can sound very similar. Mhm.
Wow, interesting. Yeah, thank you. When you were experiencing this in 1999, what was going through your mind? I mean, was it hard for you to come out of the closet with this spiritual stuff that was happening? And were you judged by your family, friends, or your society?
Yeah, I think anytime somebody starts saying something before everybody else is saying it, there's a big question mark as to, has that person lost their minds? What's going on? It was really challenging, I will say, at that time, because my children went to a Waldorf school at the time, and most of those people are, can be pretty open. So I did share with a lot of people at the Waldorf school about that. Some of them were curious and interested about the energetics. But when I would try to talk to people who were speech pathologists and say, these kids aren't who we think they are. These kids have got much more going on than we think that they do. That would get shut down very quickly. I would say I ultimately ended up getting divorced as part of this process as well, because, when you start talking about things or you see things through a completely different lens than you did, just hours before, weeks before, I mean, naturally people are, trying to figure out where they fit in that mix, right? So, yeah, it was a challenging time to say the least. But everything that the kids said to me was true. Like, I just told them, I said, don't tell me anything. One, don't tell me anything I can't do something about. And two, don't lie to me, because if I'm going to stick my neck out here, I need to know that what you're sharing with me is, I'll stick my neck out as far as I can go if it's real, but don't mess with me otherwise, kind of thing. And they never have really told me anything that I couldn't believe. So,
What are
yeah.
some of the things they shared with you that you wouldn't mind mentioning?
So much. I mean, I'm a naturally inquisitive person. And so, I'm like, okay, why are there so many kids, over the years? Like, why are there so many kids showing up diagnosed with autism? And they told me that back in 1986, there was there was an astrological configuration that was called the harmonic convergence. At
Uh,
that time, humanity was already pretty much done with kind of that old kind of patriarchal kind of reality that, make it happen, get it done kind of energy. And the kids said that humanity had already kind of consciously or unconsciously started to ask for a new kind of human being, like literally somebody could show us a new way. And so the kids started trickling in, you might say, in the late 80s. And then they started coming in more and more and more. And now we're up to 1 in 42 kids is diagnosed with autism at this point. So big jump from 1 in 10,000. Uh,
wow.
and, so they would say things like that. They told me that they held capacities that humanity had not yet grown into. They were here to help us remember. And I said, well, okay, why aren't you verbally communicating? And they would say, well, what do you think the best way is to get a parent to be introduced to telepathy than if their own child can't speak? I mean, mamas will do all kinds of things for their babies, Papa will do all kinds of things for their babies that they wouldn't explore themselves. And so there's a huge opening of the parents within this population into, you might say, um, higher spiritual capacities. Yeah. So, I mean, they've said so much, honestly, over the years. It's like that probably is the next book. I think they really have said a lot over that period of time.
Yeah, thank you. And there's different levels of autism, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some children can't speak.
Mm-hmm.
And so the child that you started to talk to, did he have language or was it?
He had he had language, but it was kind of like rote language. Like he would say, "It's the millennium. It's 1999." You don't know whether he knows what that means. You don't know.
Yeah.
So he would pick up things that he watched on TV, and he would attempt to use that language in appropriate situations, but it never quite really fit because he was singing a song or he was saying a little catchphrase from a TV show in place of, just answering a question. So in his case, I would say he was kind of partially speaking, partially verbal and using verbal communication for that. But by the end of our year together, and by the year of the time when he would tell me what to do, show me how to help him integrate, I would do that. And by the end of that year, he was fully verbal. He could, have conversations and connect and communicate and all kinds
Mm.
of things. So that was good. That was a good year.
What inspired you to write your book and what gave you the courage to start sharing this stuff to the world?
In all honesty, I wrote the book because at the time I was the lead therapist for a therapy company in
Mm.
Phoenix, Arizona. And I started telling the owner of that therapy company about some of my earlier experiences. I had gone back to being a speech pathologist for a while after I'd gotten divorced. And so I was telling her about these experiences. She goes, "Oh my gosh, you got to write this down. It's like you got to share this with the world." And I kept going, part of me was like going, "No, no, 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 no. I just wanted it to go away quietly." And then there was the other part of me that thought, just for my own sanity's sake, I needed to write that book. I needed to get it out there. And what I didn't expect is when the book was published, I literally put it out on social media. I thought, okay, here, I did it. That's all I need to do. And I've said that a lot over the years. That's it. I did it. That's all I need to do. And the kids just laugh at me. It's like, oh, that's not it. That's just it for now. But when I put it out, what really blew me away is people from all over the world reached out and they said, "Oh my gosh, I'm a therapist, or I'm a teacher, or I'm a parent, I'm a psychiatrist. I've had these same experiences with the kids. I thought I was going mad. I thought, I didn't know what was happening." And they asked me to help facilitate them, to help them understand what they were going through. And so I did that for quite some time, but I had no idea that, in my own little isolated box in Freeport, Maine, I had no idea that this was happening to people all over the world. Yeah, we know that now. There's things like one of my friends is running a podcast called the Telepathy Tapes right now. She's interviewing all kinds of people from all over the world that, whose kids are diagnosed with autism and are telepathic and have all kinds of amazing skill sets. Now we're having that conversation. But back in the day, when you're writing that book, you think you're the only one on the planet that has had that experience. And so it was nice to know I have lots of friends.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're not crazy, right?
I'm not crazy. Yeah. There are moments, but still but I'm not.
You brought up something earlier about I know when I had my awakening, I had my little glimpse of nirvana, and I had a shift. Like I was no longer immediately I was no longer the person. The old person, the old me died.
Yeah.
Kind of like that St. Francis part, is only by dying that one awakens to eternal life. Like I had a whole shift in me where I'm looking at everything through the lens of the heart, or from a spiritual perspective.
Right.
And I feel more in tune to the oneness of life. But it also created this feeling of being alienated. People looking at you as being weird, or making fun of you, or he's
Yeah.
crazy. Like, how did you deal with that? And how much has it shifted your worldview or spiritual perspective in your daily life?
Yeah. I mean, I think no matter who you talk to who's had some kind of awakening like you're speaking of, it's like whatever the dynamics of that awakening are, it's hard. I mean, because the human identity is no longer fixed to what it was fixed to. Prior to these awakenings, we see the world through the lens that we were conditioned to see it through. And after the awakening, our whole worldview has changed. And it's very isolating at first. It's very, it's lonely, is the best way to say it, because, and it does have you questioning your own sanity. It's like, I'd love to hear your story sometime too. It's that, it has you wondering, is that all true? How can little kids, show you light bodies and telepathically communicate with you? As far as how I handled that, I would say at the beginning, not very well, to be
It's
quite
hard.
honest. It's like one of the other things that happened to me is I think that we all have a certain frequency band that we're used to staying in. It's like this is how we were conditioned. We kind of stay within those parameters. But if your worldview gets completely blown open, then all of a sudden those parameters get blown open too. And my nervous system, quite frankly, couldn't handle it. And so my nervous system just caved. I had so much information coming in that you might say I looked a lot like one of the kids for a while. Like I was completely dysregulated. I couldn't really function very well in the physical world. And it took me about 2 years to have my nervous system rebuild. And it's hard because everybody thinks you're having a nervous breakdown. I know I'm having some spiritual experience, and the kids kept saying to me, no, you're rebuilding, it's okay. But people who are watching you are going, something really drastic is happening. So I think I was so focused, honestly, on rebuilding my body and my nervous system for those 2 years afterwards that you couldn't really pay attention much to whether somebody liked that process or didn't like it. I just kind of, but afterwards, you feel so fortified. So at that point, it's like, no, I didn't go for that. I didn't go through all of that for no reason. I'm saying what I know. I just have to say what I know. So, yeah. How did you handle that? Can I ask you that question back?
Yeah, it was really hard, to be honest. And it's hard to be connected and stuck in a groupthink setting.
Yeah.
And I say that because I went to the 12-step community, but
Okay.
it's hard to express your authenticity stuck in a groupthink. But what happened to me is a lot of mysticism came to me, a lot of mystics and their teachings. And when I would read on the mystics or hear something through spirit with the mystics, I didn't feel alone. I feel like they understood me. Meiser Eckhart once said, the mystics will understand, theologians will argue. I understood what he was saying. I started to understand some of the mysticism, the things they were saying. So I felt like I wasn't crazy. They gave me that confirmation. No, you're not alone. So that's probably the best thing that helped me personally.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you have to go to the actual, whatever that source is that's opened you up. They are the ones that we rely on. They are the consciousness that we have to go back to be fortified. So
yeah, you're right. I grew up in an environment that didn't talk about religion or spiritual. I mean, it was a whole different environment in LA, where I came from. So to speak about this or to have these remembrances of other lives, like in India and stuff, was really weird. So I didn't speak on it for a very long time, kept it to myself. So
yeah. Could your family hear you? Could anybody close to you hear you?
No, in the environment I came from, being in prison for life or being murdered or a drug addict, that's the norm where I came from. So
Right. Okay. Yeah, they're not going there. They're not going to the spiritual experience. Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing. It's
but
amazing.
whatever happened, I'm grateful. But it's really hard because feeling so connected to the world and having a lot of compassion for humanity, yet being outcasted, feeling the outcast at times as well. It's been a really hard process. I love that saying in Christianity, be in the world, but not of it, and it makes a lot of sense for me.
Well, and I think that we end up doing this kind of work, like, your show, your podcast, the work I do in the world. It's like so that you draw to people who are open, people who are interested. It's like I remember one of my very first mentors said to me, she said, Suzy, she goes, just be you to the max. No matter how strange that might be to somebody else, just be you to the max, because then you'll invite people to where you are instead of, staying where they are. And she said, we don't get to have these kinds of experiences unless we're meant to help open minds and open hearts. And she said, but if you go back to where they are, where everybody else is, she goes, you'll dismiss that opportunity. So I just kind of kept holding that to myself. It's like, okay, you just got to say it and the right people will start showing up. And that's why it was so encouraging when I did put the book out in 2008 that people were coming back saying that they knew this, that they had these experiences. And it was also in 2008 when I gave up, well, maybe 2010, I gave up being a speech language pathologist. I gave up my license, all of that, because there was just enough of a community that was starting to gather around that I thought, okay, I found my people. now, now I can go do that instead of what I was doing before. So, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I
Yeah.
watched a video of you and Lee Harris. I know you did a few of them with him. But the one I watched was 3 years old.
Uh-huh.
And I thought it was a beautiful recording. And you guys talked about the inner child, which I thought I would love to bring up because I love talking about this kind of stuff. I was first exposed to that terminology with Thich Nhat Hanh, Zen Master Thich Nhat Hanh. Talks a lot
Yes.
about the inner child and pausing and talking to that inner child. Can you
Yeah.
help us expand on that? Like share a little bit about the inner child?
Yeah. Through my own personal experience, I mean, we all have inner child wounding and, we all have that experience. For me, that very wounding was the thing that had me up and out of my body enough
Yeah.
to connect with the kids because the kids are also up and out of their bodies, right? And so what I was noticing as I was working with the kids is unless I was dealing with my own inner children, unless I was actually having love, compassion, and understanding for those parts of myself, I I could only do with the kids. I could only help integrate the kids I was working with to the degree that I had worked on integrating my own children, my own inner children. So one of the things that crossed my path probably, I don't, maybe 15 years ago was The Presence Process by Michael Brown. And that particular process is just amazing for working with the inner children. He says that, we all get programmed by the families that we've come into. We all get programmed within those first 7 years of life. And we don't get programmed because somebody's trying to be mean to us. We get programmed almost like as a survival strategy. This is the family that you came into. They're going to kind of teach you the basics. And he also says that a lineage is, you might say it's more important for a lineage to grow than it is for a human being to grow.
Yeah.
But when a human being grows, a lineage grows. So what he would say is like, our parents had certain traumas and dramas in their life. Whatever they didn't work out by the time they conceived us is put into us so that the next generation tries to work that out. And whatever we don't work out before we conceive our children goes down the line in that way. And that way a whole lineage gets to get cleared. It's also true that there will be certain souls put into that lineage, probably like you and I, that will work really hard at clearing out the inner child trauma. And our souls simply have that capacity to have love, compassion, and understanding for those parts of us that got wounded, that got hurt. And so therefore, when we do that kind of work, we impact the lineage going forward and backwards. And I've seen that in my own life. Like I see that when I do the presence process, and I think I've done it a lot. I've done it in the last 15 years several times. But every single time I go through that process and I let my inner children come up and I learn how to respond versus react to life scenarios,
Uh,
every single time that happens, then it impacts my lineage in a positive way. And I've watched it with my mother and my relationship with her, and I've watched it with my children and my relationship with them. The more I dig in, and so I think that the tricky part is that most human beings, as they grow in age, not always immaturity, but as they grow, grow in age, what ends up happening is the patterns of the child that haven't yet been loved still play out. And that's why we do have adults who act in very immature ways. It's because their own inner children just haven't been addressed, supported, nurtured. And without that, we just keep repeating the same patterns over and over again. The past becomes the future over and over again. So to me, that is one of the most important pieces of work I think anybody on this planet can do, actually. Yeah.
So, in this 12-step community, they talk about character defects or shortcomings, and you ask God to remove them. But instead of asking anything to be removed or something outside of you to remove it, it's maybe about integrating that, right? And talking to that inner child, making it feel safe, having understanding and awareness, and bringing it back to love.
Well, that's just it. I mean, if you said to anybody, if you walked up to anybody and said, I think you have a defect and we've got to fix that, you know, it's like that person's defenses are going to come up immediately because
Yeah.
there's not a person on this planet that wants to be seen as broken or wrong. We want to be understood. We want to be seen and heard and valued. But most people walking around out there have yet to see, hear, and value themselves. So it's pretty darn hard for them to see, value, and hear somebody else, you know? But, and I think that that's what I loved about the presence process. He said, we're not getting rid of feeling. We're getting better at feeling.
Yeah.
And so we're getting better at letting whatever comes up to come up and knowing that, just like a little toddler, a little kid, if they want your attention and they're pulling on your pant leg and saying, hey, 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 I need you, I need you. If we push them away, that next thing that's going to happen is they're going to be having a tantrum or they're going to be throwing a full-blown hissy fit. Whereas when we get that tug, we turn around to that child and go, what do you need, honey? How can I help you? What's going on for you? It's the same way with our inner children. Our inner children will give us a little bit of a hint that we need to pay attention. And if we don't listen, it just keeps getting more significant until something's starting to go on in the body. So to me, let's get those as they're coming up as feelings so they don't have to coagulate into something, the 2x4 of something going wrong in the physical body. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I don't like using that term, defects of character or having defects of character. They're just patterns, behavior patterns, and imprints from my
Exactly.
early childhood.
Yeah. And the more we can make it, neutralize it, I think most of humanity has been taught to be in some kind of blame, shame, or guilt, which is a really low vibrational triangle. And to get to love, compassion, and understanding, it's like it's the other end of the spectrum, and I learned this directly from the kids. The kids kept going, love, compassion, and understanding. Just stay there, stay there. And I was like, oh, I can't do it. I just want to be mad at myself or I want to be frustrated with that. And they'd go, no, 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 it's just love, compassion, and understanding. And then I would spend some time there, and all of a sudden, it's like whatever that was just disappeared. I was like, I don't know what just happened, but it worked. So you only have to have that happen a few times, and you kind of go, I think I'll go that route instead of blame, shame, and guilt. Yeah.
It's funny, like the mind automatically wants to blame someone else when it's going through something. I know mine does, catching it in
Yeah.
action. But Thich Nhat Hanh taught me, Zen Buddhist monk, he taught me that understanding is love's other name. When I could understand people's situation, their upbringing, why they're reacting a certain way, fear within me, I can understand others as well. And it's changed my whole life, having that understanding. It is a
Yeah.
love's other name, and it does lead to compassion. So,
That's it. That's it. And you look at anybody who's, really hurting other people, I mean, really is kind of in this frame of mind that, it's all about them and they're okay hurting whoever kind of crosses their path. If you look, there's trauma somewhere. There's trauma. It doesn't mean we have to put up with it. Doesn't mean we have to say that's okay. But the compassion part is I'm going to remove myself from this experience because I have too much compassion for myself at this point to go through those things over and over again. We can equally have compassion for the fact that the person who's carrying that out is doing so because they were traumatized. Yeah.
yeah, you're right. Thank you. You mentioned earlier that children are coming in at a higher rate with autism. Oh, it was one out of,
It
was
was
that
1
four?
in 10. It was 1 in 10,000 in 86, and it's 1 in the statistics change, but say 1 in 40, 36, 1 in 42, something around that range now.
So it definitely rise. But you said they're here to create a new human and really change the collective consciousness of humanity for
Yeah.
the greater good. But people may claim that they may say it's from vaccinations and so other. Does it even matter why they come? How it
Well,
manifests? Uh,
yeah, it depends on, I mean, there's all kinds of conversations, obviously, like
yeah.
on any topic, we can have multiple conversations. But when I asked the kids that, I said, okay, Riley, for instance, he did show me that the start of his autism characteristics were vaccine related, right? And at the time when he said that, I had 4 daughters. I had already vaccinated, the first 3, kept them up because I was a good speech pathologist and that's what I was supposed to do.
Right.
But I stopped right then, and didn't do any further because I learned something about it. But the other side of it that people don't talk about is that why are certain kids susceptible to autism because of the vaccines and why are other kids not, right? And so I went back and I would ask that question. And Riley started this conversation, and I've had the same one with so many kids, thousands of kids over the years. They'd say, we came in at a higher frequency. We came in as the new human. And there are certain things that simply don't work for the vibration of the new human.
Hmm.
And so they said, look at what's happening just because we're here. Just because our souls have incarnated at this time, now all of a sudden people are questioning vaccines. People are looking at diet. People are talking, not just assuming that their doctors know everything just because their doctors went through a certain educational, went down a certain educational track. It's like education is changing, all these different things are changing simply because these kids are here. And they would say to me, so these are the systems, these are the things that need to change in order to be coherent with the new human, right?
Yeah.
And then they would also say, by the way, you're telepathic with us all day, every day. You've seen us heal. You've seen us, read minds. You've seen us do all these kinds of things. That's also an opportunity for humanity as humanity steps into being the new human, or being, you might say, humanity, instead of 1.0, maybe 5.0. Yeah. It's like, it's so, yeah, they would just say, we're helping you see what no longer serves. And we're also inviting you to some of the gifts and capacities that we all hold, but we've been separated from in blame, shame, and guilt. Yeah.
Well, I love that. Thank you. Thank you for that answer.
Yeah.
What's the difference in how the ego manifests with someone that's on the spectrum versus someone that's not?
I saw that question and I was thinking, that is a brilliant question. And I purposely didn't give it much thought because I was really curious what was going to come out of my mouth at the time that you asked that particular one. So, and we might have to call in the kids just to get a little bit more clarification because I might not know the answer to this. But what I will say is that for a person who is not as focused on the body, is not as, most people think they are the body. I am this body, I am this flesh, right? And it's not true, but most people believe that. So for kids on the spectrum who aren't as interfaced with that, their identities are more connected to something beyond the body, you might say. We could call that higher, but definitely more expansive than just physical. And so their ego identity is identified with that versus most human beings who are identified with this. Yeah,
Yeah.
the physical body. They also will say that their consciousness is more what they call spherical in nature, more whole in nature. And our consciousness has been trained to be more linear in nature. And so if our egos are identified with time and space, we base everything on that happened in the past and I sure as heck hope it doesn't happen in the future. Right?
Yeah.
So we're always in this energy of fear, anxiety, stress, if we are just identified here. Whereas the kids see it more from a wholeness perspective. And so, yeah, we might dip in one way or another, but there's another part of us that's going to come in and elevate that. They all exist simultaneously. So, to answer your question, I think that the ego identity of kids on the spectrum, especially, probably much higher than ours, probably more whole. I think it's also true that, at least under the right circumstances, if you have a child who's been loved and nurtured and supported with that diagnosis, most people will say that if you stand in their presence, it feels like love.
Yeah.
And to me, that kind of tells you everything you need to know about where their ego identity is. Yeah. We need the
They're more
identity. It's just, where is that identity? We need some structure, I think, or we would just, yeah. Yeah, I don't know what would happen. But it's just, where is that identity?
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I love that answer because a lot of the Eastern religions will say that the body is the ego, identification with
Oh,
the body. So
yeah,
maybe they're kind of beyond that, more closer to their essence, living more in their essence versus
right.
someone that's not
And
on the spectrum.
and I don't know how you read that, but when I've heard like some of those philosophies about sometimes I think people can say, if the ego's the body, I think some people make that mean that the body's bad. And I
Yeah.
don't think that that's the case. I think that it's just the identification of of ourselves as a body and nothing else is going to
Yeah.
create limitations, as to how we express in the world and, what we know is possible and how we love in the world. If you think you're only the body and the body dies and you're done and that's it, you know, but if you have that broader view, then the body becomes a means or a catalyst to express that into the world. You get to change the world through the body instead of having to, leave it to get to some pearly gates or something.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
definitely agree with you for sure. Do these children ever talk to you about the realities or different realms they're experiencing?
Oh yeah. Yes. Um, that, it just makes me laugh because uh, Riley, and many kids have said this after the fact, but Riley used to always say, Suzy, there's the real world and then there's your world. It's like, and of course at the time he was saying it, I thought, oh my gosh, you're the kid that's having some challenges. My world is the real world, but no, he just flipped that. Yeah, these kids, they see into other realities. They know about other dimensions, whether those are dimensions that you would consider more galactic or whether they're angelic or archangelic. I have one young man that I've been working with for quite some time, and I was asking him, we've been working quite a bit on his own integration process, and
Mm.
he spells to communicate. And he said, being me means channeling the divine, like 24/7. Being me is channeling the divine. And I was like, okay. And so, he's also talked about the angelic realm and the archangelic realm. So they just don't have the same kind of filters that we have. Their neurology is wired very differently than most neurotypical human beings. And, when you open those parts of the brain that most people don't have open, you also have access to things that other people don't have access to. And so, yeah, they see, not only do they see other dimensions and other realms that way, but just like Riley saw into me and he saw a mastery in my eyes that I didn't even know was there. This These kids walk up to people and say things all the time. I've had kids say, you know, my teacher's sick or my teacher has cancer,
Wow.
only to find out later that he knew that because he could smell it or he
Wow.
could see it in her energy field and I didn't know it. Or I've had one kid walked up to a therapist friend of mine and said, congratulations. And she was pregnant, but she hadn't even told her husband yet that she was pregnant. I mean, it was just like literally days. But this person, this child diagnosed with autism could see right in. People
Wow.
talk all the time about the kids reading other people's minds and, you know, planting seeds of thought. And so now there's a lot of skill sets there that we would all consider multidimensional in nature that a lot of times kids don't get credit
Well,
for.
so they are doing work in the beyond the 3D reality in the astral or spirit world, in a sense,
They
to help
are.
humanity. It's
They are.
interesting.
A lot of them help. Uh, well, let me say it this way. A lot of the kids that I've worked with over the years seem to have a real focus on the children of this planet. So it's like I have a lot of kids who are like literally here. Like if a child was being harmed or hurt, and that child was calling out for an angel, calling out for support from wherever they would call that out from God or source or whatever you want to call that. A lot of times, kids diagnosed on the spectrum, that higher part of them is what is answering the call. It's like I've had so many kids say that, like during COVID, like I had one young woman and a young man that both kind of do that work. And they said that during COVID, it just got so loud that there were so many kids reaching out, and I understand, parents were stressed and kids weren't going to school, and it was very traumatic time for a lot of people on this planet. And a lot of kids were, kind of being harmed during that time. And they would say, oh my gosh, it's like it's just getting so loud. Um, and so I think it's also interesting that, we look at these kids and a lot of times people say they're dysregulated. They can't regulate their bodies. And well, if we were dealing with volumes of information flying through us all the time, voices from little kids or the angelic realm, or, we'd be a little dysregulated too. Just like we both were when we had our openings, our spiritual openings, our bodies are a little dysregulated after that. It takes a little bit of time for somebody who's had like a Kundalini awakening or something like that to get their body organized around that. These kids have that coming in 24/7.
Wow.
All the time. So the fact that they can even do as well as they're doing here just blows my mind. It's just like, I'm just like, wow, I couldn't.
Yeah, thank you. What kind of advice would you give parents or caregivers looking to understand more autistic children? You know, to help their loved ones through the lens of a higher consciousness.
Well, I don't mean to give a plug, but if they're looking for information about their kids and about, um, that kind of thing, I mean, definitely websites like mine, Kai Dickens, the telepathy tapes, anything that's expanding their consciousness or their belief system around their children is going to be very helpful, because we have a tendency to, these kids get a diagnosis, and from the minute they get a diagnosis, we see them through the lens of that diagnosis. We kind of stop seeing the challenges and the capacities. We just see the challenge. And so, parents are going to want, or professionals for that matter, are going to want to seek out sources, like our website or like others that can really help them see their kids through a different lens. I think that's really important. The other thing I'll say as far as connection and communication with their kids is, and I asked the kids this question: what do I tell your parents? If I can only tell them one thing, what do I tell them? And they said, basically, get real, be authentic, speak where you are, not where you think we want you to be. When you're sad, you're sad. When you're happy, you're happy. They're not suggesting that we project this onto them, but what they're saying is, we know how you feel anyway. We know what's going through your minds anyway. If you'll be authentic with that, if you'll acknowledge that, we won't feel like we have to show it to you through our behaviors, right? If we know you're taking care of you, then we won't have to show you what needs to be taken care of. And it has a tendency to very quickly, that level of authenticity, bring a lot of ease into a home that very often doesn't have any. So,
Thank you. And your book, Awesomism, how did you come up with the name?
the kids told me, just like everything else. They would say we don't have autism. Stop saying we have autism. We have awesomism. And I was like, I get it. It's like, we came in with awesomism. People look at that and they call it a disorder, but they kept saying it's not a disorder. It's a difference. And the reason it looks like a difference is because, again, we're coming in awesome. We're coming in at this very high frequency. That is awesomism. And as we integrate and descend, you might say, and interplay with a physical body, there are some things within that exchange that help us. And there are some things that really, just send us up and out. So, so they told me we have awesomism.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I told you earlier that what's going on in our world right now, I felt a lot of fear.
Mm-hmm.
And I love humanity as a whole. And what is the main message you can say through your work with these awesome children have to the world to end it with?
That we've got good news. It's like that souls so love this world that they come even when it's challenging for them to embody, that they come in order to uplift humanity, to show us what our capacity is, to let us know that, we're beyond this energy of separation, that we're heading in a unified direction, even when it doesn't look like that, through the wars and the nightly news and all that other stuff. It's like there's more people on this planet right now that are open. A lot of those people are the 1 in 43 people that have children diagnosed with autism because their worlds have been rattled. So one way or another, either through the kids coming or through just the energetics that are happening now, humanity is evolving, and usually it gets really loud before it gets very still. So we're heading in that direction. Yeah.
No mud, no lotus flower, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you for coming on. I'm going to end it with some words from a lady named Suzy Miller. You might know her. She says, negative words carry negative vibration. What do you want your child to reflect back to you? The label or disordered, or the label of gifted in a new way? Thanks for helping us broaden our lens on this topic. So thank you very much.
Thanks for having me. It was a really great conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Namastizzle.
Just know we out here. Know we out here working in a major way. Had to speak on it just to make a play. Any given subject, know we make a way. Time to level up on a day-to-day. Know we out here working for the greater good. Expand your mind, broaden your lens the way you should. From the stars to the galaxy to speak on spirituality. Higher understanding for the neighborhood.